Problem. People think that conclusion paragraphs for their lit analysis essays are either A, meaningless, or B, just summaries of what they've already written in their essays. But these are lies.
You lie!
Providentially though, I have the solution. This video. I also want to point out too that this video won't just help you set up to potentially earn the sophistication point on your lit exam, but what you're going to learn here will also work on all of your papers in college. Just ask any of my former students who use the methodology I'm about to show you in their current classes. From me, you'll get no lies, just promises.
Depending on the promises.
And these promises are worth liking by pressing that thumbs up right below this video. And you can support the Garden of English by smiting the subscribe button down there, becoming a channel member, and even offering a super thanks as well. Alright, let's finish this prose analysis essay. As we write this conclusion paragraph, we're going to rely on the publicly released cherry bomb passage that we've been using in all of the prior videos for this AP Lit Question 2 series. The passage and all of the other test hacks and writing instructional videos that we've done are linked in the description. If you haven't read this passage before, or if you haven't read it in a while, make sure that you take a moment to read and review it right now. Just look under the vid, press the word more that's bold-faced, and find all of the links that you're looking for. Anyway, the most fundamental thing you need to know about writing conclusions is that they must be idea-based. You must also know that it is important that you produce this paragraph because it will be the paragraph where you extend the focus of your paper's analysis of the literary situation and connect it to the real world, the one that you actually live in, you know, the one that's not fiction. And the way that you do this is by making your conclusion universal. All that universal means is that if you want to talk about something that's specifically mentioned in the piece of literature that you're analyzing when you're writing the conclusion, you'd want to consider not doing so. No need to necessarily mention characters or authors or other elements of the story. The majority of your essay already did this, so we're going to transform these concrete moments into worldly wisdom. Now, I could just keep talking about how to do this in all of these abstract terms, but it would be better if I provided you with some directions, steps, and examples. So I'm going to do that. Let's learn the 3 steps of producing a meaningful conclusion that will increase your chances of scoring good grades in your classes and earning the sophistication point on your AP Lit exam. Step 1 of conclusion writing is identifying 4 to 7 ideas that clearly relate to the passage that you're providing analysis for. To do this, think about events in the story and then try to identify an idea or ideas that underlie this action that's presented in the reading. For example, if I were writing a conclusion about an essay I wrote about Toy Story, I'd mention ideas like jealousy and friendship. Or if I were watching my favorite Pixar film, which happens to be WALL-E by the way, I'd identify ideas like sustainability, adventure, and overconsumption. All of the action in these stories relate to those ideas. Essentially, ideas are singular, abstract concepts that are nouns. Now, I'm not asking you to write thematic statements right now. I just want you to start by identifying simple idea words. If you struggle with identifying ideas on your own, know that we have a poster of them linked below this video. It looks a bit like this. Anyway, in relation to this cherry bomb reading, when I think about all that I see going on in the passage, I can identify the following ideas that correspond with different events or elements in the story: adulthood, comfort, sentimentality, nostalgia, joviality, naivete, adventure, blissful ignorance, immaturity, and secrecy. I wouldn't expect you to identify all of the same ideas that I just listed out. And like I said, you want to try to identify 4 to 7 ideas, but I wanted to give you plenty of examples and options so you could see how you should progress in writing your conclusions. Now, once you actually have ideas identified about what your story pertains to, you can move on to step 2 of producing the best conclusions for literary analysis ever. In step 2, you need to take the ideas from step 1 and then generate a sentence that establishes a relationship between 2 or more of the ideas that you identified in our last step. When you do this, make sure that the relationship that you articulate is one that is implied by the story that you're analyzing. This sentence you create here will be the first sentence of your conclusion. Here's an example of what a first sentence could look like. Remembering the jovial days of yesteryear can be quite comforting, especially when dealing with the realities of adulthood. Let's consider the ideas that I've included in the sentence that you just saw. The phrase jovial days of yesteryear and quite comforting relate to nostalgia and comfort. And dealing with the realities of adulthood relates to the ideas of adulthood and sentimentality. So this would be a quality first sentence for a conclusion that you're writing about this passage. Now, if you really struggle with generating this first sentence, I want you to consider starting your conclusion with the phrase in a world where, and then trying to generate the sentence. This will force you to consider the real world relationships of the ideas that you're trying to to consider as you project the wisdom that you want in the rest of your conclusion paragraph. Just think of how easily I could take the sentence I just showed you and transform it into one that starts with the phrase I just mentioned. It would read like this: in a world where the realities of adulthood are a consistent struggle, remembering the jovial days of yesteryear can be quite comforting. Just using such a phrase to start your first sentence can work as a springboard to help you articulate the relationship that you're trying to generate between the ideas that you've discovered. Now, if I wanted to really work to develop a stylized and sophisticated conclusion, I could also try turning that first sentence into a pertinent metaphor to convey the relationships between the ideas I created in step one. So I'm going to give you an example of this from a former student of mine who did quite well on his AP Lit exam. When he wrote his first sentence, he chose to develop a comparison, and here's what he wrote. Recollection of childhood memories invokes a cozy and comforting sense of nostalgia, which wraps the adult mind in a warm blanket of simpler times. Sammy, my former student, too addresses nostalgia, adulthood, and sentimentality, but he brings in a childish image that is meant to echo the immaturity of the 5th grade narrator. This image that ties the narrator to naivete helps to embellish and augment the argument. Now that you've seen what it takes to create the first sentence, we're going to move on to the last step of producing the conclusion. Step 3. In this step, I want to just let you know right now, this step should not take up more than 5 sentences. And honestly, it can be as little as 2. This means that your conclusion shouldn't be more than 6 sentences and will most likely be as little as 3. Anyway, to teach this step, let me ask you a question. Did you know that you have an inner Disney princess? If not, now you do. Her name is Cinderella. The reason why I say this is because with your conclusion, you need to essentially leave behind a metaphorical glass slipper that will make your reader want to scour the country in order to find you just to discuss your insights about this piece of literature all the more. Creepy. I know.
Here's Johnny.
But truthfully, I really create this metaphor here because you want to remember that this conclusion has to be impactful. The best way to channel this inner Cinderella and let her shine is by writing about how the universal truth that you produced in your first sentence is meant to be acted upon by any reader in his or her own life. What you're basically doing in these final sentences of your conclusion is this. You are trying to demonstrate how if your readers know and understand the universal message mentioned in your first sentence, here is what they can do in their own lives to apply it to how they actually live. This becomes the bridge from the fiction to reality. You're trying to impart some wisdom that someone should gain after being able to experience the knowledge and understanding of the reading. As you consider what these final sentences should look like, you want to answer this question. How should any reader's life change based on experiencing this text? The answer to this question is what will make up the final 2 to 5 sentences that you're going to write in your conclusion. Now, this may also be an abstract explanation, but I think an example will really clarify what I'm driving towards. In fact, I'm going to offer 2 examples from former students of mine. We're going to start with Sammy's conclusion because, well, we already looked at his first sentence. Here's what his conclusion would look like. Recollection of childhood memories invokes a cozy and comforting sense of nostalgia, which wraps the adult mind in a warm blanket of simpler times. Positive memories of the more adventurous days hold significant value, and although they spend most of their time tucked away in a private box of things while hidden in a cave-dark closet of the mind, one should always remember how to access them and do so often. That's a strong conclusion. But before we talk about it in depth, let's look at one written by another one of my former students named Victoria, who took a different approach to the universal truths explored in this particular reading. Here's what she had to say. While the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia highlight the intricacies of childhood innocence, they blur the tragic emotions associated with dark memories. The speaker's casuality in regard to what most people would consider highly negative experiences illustrates how looking back fondly on one's youth will typically result in a romanticism of hardships. Although most individuals think of nostalgia as a harmless form of blissful escapism, it can also be used as a way of concealing traumatic experiences in the middle of a cave-dark closet of one's mind. I want you to notice how both of these students were writing about the same story, yet conveyed completely different tones in their conclusion. Both also made quite clear universal connections by relying heavily on universal language. They didn't mention specific characters. They also didn't say the universal you, which is an immature writing style that many kids actually have. You want to get rid of that. Instead, these students relied heavily on words like people, individuals, and ones. Nice and open and inclusive to anyone reading. Sammy's message was to embrace the nostalgic moments and take comfort in them. And Victoria's message was to recognize that nostalgia is a coping mechanism and may actually prevent individuals from dealing with reality, so people should reconsider how they view the reflective process. Either one works amazingly well, and each conclusion is incredibly clear. One final note here. To write a truly brilliant final sentence in your conclusion, you're going to want to include a 3 to 5 word piece of text from the reading in your last sentence. Just look back at the examples that I shared. Did you even notice that they included quotes in that final sentence? Or were they integrated so well you almost overlooked them until I drew your attention to them right now? Quick quote integration is so sophisticated because it highlights how easily synthesized your understanding of the literature is with your understanding of the world around you. Including a quote like this in such a manner is like polishing your glass slipper, so it adds an extra enticing sparkle to an already captivating adornment. Yes, your conclusion is an adornment to your essay, but if you learn to do this well, you'll leave your readers in awe. Now, I'm thrilled you know how to fully write literary analyses when the text is right in front of you, but what about when it's not? Literary arguments are their own beasts and can be hard to wrangle in. But luckily, I got everything you need to navigate through the AP Lit Question 3 prompt right here.